Welcome to Teaching Liberty. I'm Stephanie, creator of Teaching Liberty and your host. And today we are going to learn to play chess. And I say we because I don't know how to play chess, but I do know somebody who does. Before we introduce him, though, make sure you've hit that like button, you're subscribed to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. And like all my videos, you can extend your learning with activities in the Teaching Liberty community. Not only do you support this channel and get access to learning activities by becoming a member, but you also get a liberty-loving community. We have discussion boards and groups away from big tech censorship, exclusive member content, and so much more. Go to teachingliberty.org/community and become a member today. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our chess teacher for today, Mr. Jeremiah Hosea Landess. How you doing?
I'm so happy to be here. I'm doing great. I'm really honored to be here, Stephanie. I'm so excited about what you're doing, and I'm so excited to share chess with Teaching Liberty. Like, I'm going to try to contain my emotions here because I'm so
Oh
enthusiastic.
no, this is definitely exciting. Like I said, I'm not a chess player. I don't know much about chess. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and what makes you qualified to teach us about chess?
Okay, well, I was on the second best elementary school chess team in the country when I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grades at
Wait,
uh,
hold on. Only the
Hunter.
second best though? We gotta have the second best.
Only the second best, but you know what? One of my best friends was one of the best chess players in the country at the time, and I was just kind of a tag along, and I picked up quite a bit of chess because we had just a great team. I wasn't one of the
Mm,
leading players on the team, but I was just in an incredible chess environment with a world-renowned teacher, Sunil Weeramantry, who is an outstanding chess player in his own right, an international master, the multiple national champion of Sri Lanka, multiple New York State chess champion, but even more famous as a coach because he's coached some of the most talented kids in the country, and then is also the coach and um, father-in-law of Hikaru Nakamura, who's one of the greatest chess players really in the history of the game.
oh, it
Great
sounds like you
coach.
know a thing or two here.
Well, my story is a little bit different than the average chess coach because I'm a bass player and a singer. I'm a musician. And
Mm,
after playing bass for my income between the age of 19 and 24, a gig got canceled or a tour got canceled. And I said, wow, I need to have some kind of backup plan here because I
mm,
can't be at the tender mercy of cancellations and things. And I don't remember the timing of it was so magical and strange. Right as I was trying to look for additional income, my same good friend from elementary school asked me if I wanted to teach chess. I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And I rediscovered the game. And that was 20 years ago. So now I've been
mm.
teaching chess for 20 years. And it's just been an amazing experience working with children. I currently teach some senior citizens. The youngest child I taught in a group was 2 years old. And then I'm not sure how old my oldest student ever was, but I think like 83 years old because
Mm.
actually chess is great to keep senior citizens' minds activated. And there's a whole other health benefit of chess a lot of people aren't aware of, which it really does help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's and other degenerative diseases of the
Right. It
brain.
works to develop the mind if you're a young kid. It works to keep the mind sharp if you're old. And for everybody in between, you were telling me that like critical thinking skills, focus, a lot of the skills that are so valuable in life and your teachers and your parents are always kind of lecturing you about, you can actually get through chess. And so you're gonna teach me to play chess. So like, because like I might be able to name some of the pieces and like some of the ways they move, but I really don't know much at all, which is great because I want to introduce people to the basics of chess. But before we get there, can you tell me a
Okay,
little
we'll
bit
start from
more
the beginning.
why chess is useful and like, how is life like chess? Because that's always the thing somebody says, like life is like chess, not checkers. So what do you think about that?
Oh, there's so many things to say about that. And I think you have to play a little bit of chess to get a feel for the meaning of that saying. One thing is, it really teaches you about winning and losing and the reality
Mm,
of that. It teaches you about every aspect of winning and losing. You can play a perfect game and it can all fall apart right at the end. And that's sort of the
Mm,
tragedy in some cases of losing a chess game. But when you execute a game to perfection, you have the joy of all the harmony that you executed in the sequential process of picking all the right moves. It's not like a
mm,
boxing match where you can just keep punching harder or just keep digging in. You have to dig in like a fighter, but you have to pause and not miss the cautious moves to
mm,
procure the winning position, if that
mm,
makes sense. Chess also, it requires specificity of thought. It requires you to see
mm.
the details of what's going on and to be aware of the details. That's one thing that I challenge my students to do, is to be specific in describing what they're doing. So they'll say, for example, move the pawn. And I'll say, well, there's 8 pawns. So which pawn are you referring to?
Yeah, and I
And,
can definitely see
you know,
how that's so important for life is being specific with what you're doing, having discernment, right, in those moves and the confidence to do
a
it.
great concept that will come across, which is called a reasonable continuation. So when you
Mm,
get to the position that you're in, there's only so many reasonable continuations. We say we have this good move, and this good move, and then we need to sit and evaluate them and decide
um,
which one we prefer. Assessing what are the quality choices available to us, and then choosing between those choices which we prefer. Some cases, one is superior to the other, and in other cases, it's just a personal choice. Basically, if you want to go on vacation in California or Florida, it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it's going to lead to two totally different scenarios.
and these are all things that even myself, I'm like, that's something I need to work on. Like, I need to be more precise about my decisions. I need to be more careful and more specific in tracking things, you know? So, um, perhaps that this is coming to me in a time in my life, like chess came to you. Maybe whoever's out there watching this video, chess is coming to you. And this is going to be that thing that
Absolutely.
sparks your fire, you know, sets you free.
I've made this statement many times to all my students. I firmly believe that if you play chess, you will be better through chess at everything else that you do, because it enhances your memory, which is a fact, and it
Mm.
and it actually just activates all sorts of neurological connections.
Like, I'm brand new to the game, so people who are out there just getting introduced to chess, let's go ahead and bring us through it.
Now, before we even discuss the pieces, let's cover the chessboard really quickly. Okay. Now, the chessboard has 64 squares on the board, right? 8 by 8. 8 times 8 equals 64. And that means, as you can see, there are 32 dark squares and 32 white squares. Okay. Now, that seems pretty obvious, but it's a good thing I like to plant in students' minds from the beginning, which is that something my coach said: an ordinary person sees the white pieces versus the black pieces on a 64 board. A chess player sees the white pieces against the dark pieces on a 64 square board with 32 white squares and 32 dark squares.
Mm,
So just to be aware of that, and it'll make more sense as we go. The color of the squares, it themselves are relevant. We might, for example, try to control the white center squares or the dark center squares, or we might make a move that weakens the color squares of one or another around our king, et cetera, et cetera. So there's 64 squares on the chessboard, and if we look at these lines from front to back, like from here to here, this would be your A file. This is the B file, the C file, and so on. We have files from A through H. The lines from left to right would be the ranks. So this is the first rank, this is the second rank, this is the third rank, and so on, right? And where the letters and numbers intersect is how we find our squares. So, for example,
mm,
if we put this pawn right here, that's a very common first move that we would call E4. Oh, look, we're on Lichess. So, as a matter of fact, you have a lot of great resources nowadays. Lichess is extremely thorough. You go to Lichess, open up the analysis board, and gives you these really good descriptions of the moves that you're
mm.
making, move by move. But let's talk about the pieces now. Before we get to our pieces, let's make reference to our pawns. Now, pawns, of course, they're pieces, but when we say pieces, we're usually referring to not our pawns.
Pawns are the first row of the pieces on either side, right?
Right. A general rule of
Okay.
thumb in chess is saying we prefer the movement of pieces to pawns. And the
Okay.
reason for that is pieces are just mathematically more powerful. You're just
Mm,
controlling more space on the board. However, the pawn cannot be underestimated or undervalued, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that amateur players will make is thinking you can just kind of lose a pawn and it's no big deal. A
okay.
single pawn can win or lose a chess game. And as a matter of fact, a saying I would love for all of our students here to remember as they venture into chess is the pawn is the born defender of the chessboard. No unit is better for defense than the pawn. Do you see this dot, these two dots right here? It's illustrated for us. A
Okay.
pawn can move one or two squares to start the game. After
Okay.
that, only one at a time. So you
Okay.
can choose to enter the game, not on just on your first move, but any of these pawns, when they make their first move, can move one or two squares to start. And after that, it's only one at a time. Pawns
Okay.
cannot move backwards, they cannot move sideways, and they
Okay.
are the only unit on the chessboard with a different move to capture than they do to normally move. So let's take a look at that quickly. When this pawn goes here, e4, as we already saw,
Okay.
very common first chess move, and black goes e5. This is a very common response.
Okay.
Now, if white goes here, which is a fun thing to do, they go f4. That would be the first move of, you'll see it on the side of the board here, the king's gambit.
Okay.
And black is offering a free pawn, which is why we call it a gambit pawn. We're gambling that you can get a free pawn, but we're going to accelerate our development and organize an attack that's going to more than make up for the loss or the deficit of the pawn.
Okay. So they can only move forward, but
Right.
if they to take
The
somebody
pawn
out, they can move
captures
diagonally.
right. The pawn captures diagonally forward, but it cannot move in that manner unless it's
Mm,
capturing. A lot of the kids like to say these pawns are stuck in mud. They're stuck in mud. They can't move until something arrives here or here for the white pawn, here or here for the black pawn. Then we can't move. Okay.
right.
So pawns, as we said, are the born defenders of the chessboard. And basically, the pawn is like a loyal foot soldier who can stand guarding a square, guarding a fellow pawn, guarding a piece, and they can just be a staunch defender. And unlike the pieces, they don't need to be active. So that's a key word for chess, and we'll get back to that later. But we want all of our pieces to be active.
Okay.
Now, another quick quote, a great quote, so you know to never underestimate your pawns. Philidor, who is one of the great players of the 1700s, Philidor said, "The pawns are the soul of the game." So those are our pawns. Let's get right into the most abstract piece to learn about, the difficult piece for beginners to grasp sometimes, which is the knight, which is this
Mm,
horse figure over here, right? We have a king's
mm,
knight on both sides, and we have a queen's knight on both sides. And the knight is the only piece that can jump over other pieces,
mm,
right? So this knight can go right here to f3, and that's actually a really strong start to your chess game as well. Oh, look, it's called the Zukertort opening. Zukertort was the loser in the first ever chess world championship in 1886. And that's a very strong move. Now, let me highlight something. If a knight goes to its other option, which would be over here, knight h3, now that move is not a good move. Look at the ammonia opening. This opening stinks. It says it right
Um,
here. Now look,
mm,
this knight This is the simple mathematics of the game. Right now, the knight changes color squares every time it moves, and it moves in this capital L type of way, right? So if we go knight F3, like we first witnessed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares, right?
Oh, he has
So
the
we
option
have
of moving
8
to next.
squares of influence there towards the
Okay.
center. But look, if we went here, if we went
Right.
to H3, which is again the move that was criticized right here, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4
Mm.
squares. So would you rather have $40 or $80? I mention right now. It sounds a little fancy, but it's not fancy. Develop just means bringing these pieces from the back rank into the game. Black wants to keep up with development and protect this pawn. So they go knight C6 and they keep up with white in development and also protect their center pawn. For kids to remember as we go up, gallop, turn,
Oh,
right?
okay. Up, gallop, turn.
Or
I like that.
gallop, turn, step, step,
Okay,
right?
cool.
Gallop, gallop, step, or gallop, turn, step, step. We'll see them in action in a second. But the bishops simply move diagonally, okay? So if we develop the goes here, we can from there transpose, as it's called, into a few different openings, moving this pawn as we saw before and getting into a variation of the king's gambit, or we can develop our knights posing into the Italian game. All different things could happen,
Okay.
but bishops simply move diagonally. They can go as far or as little as they want. What makes chess the game of kings and the king of games, what makes chess the game that was invented over 2,000 years ago that still mystifies us to this day, is that the chess master, the skilled chess player, is balancing the elements of material, time, and space. And that will make more sense as we play, but that's the abstract and incredible thinking that we're training our mind in. It's not a crude material game, which is most of the board games that we know. We capture and gobble up checkers, or in Monopoly, you get Monopoly money and property, and it's just two different expressions of material. So most of the games we know are
Right.
material. It doesn't work like that in chess. We're constantly trading and counterbalancing material, time, and space. So we've
Mm.
looked at the pawns, we've looked at the knight, we've looked at the bishop. Now we're going to look at these guys in the corner. This is real estate. These are the rooks, right? The
Mm.
castles on the board. And the rooks are the second most powerful pieces in the game after the queen. We're going to get to the queen next. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, undoubtedly,
Of
but the rooks are
course.
the second most powerful. The rook moves in straight lines. The rook
Okay.
is very simple. It can go forward and backwards as far as it wants, or left and right as far as it wants. But it
Okay.
enters the game a little bit later, usually, because we need to clear out some space. It's usually a mistake, and there's exceptions to every rule in chess. Well, every principle, I should say. The rules are the rules, but every guideline, every principle has an exception. So there's weird situations where you might develop your rook early in the game, but that's really rare. The rule of thumb is knights and bishops first, and usually knights before bishops. So rooks are kind of stuck in the corner here, but we'll see as we develop our pieces. The rook enters the game in a very prominent way. Let's get to the queen quickly. The queen is a combination of a rook and a bishop. So you have a rook and bishop rolled in one in the queen. The queen can move as far as she wants forwards, backwards, and sideways, but she can also move diagonally like a bishop. However, let's be clear, she cannot jump. The knight is the only piece that can
Okay.
jump, and she cannot change directions, right? She decides whether she wants to move in a straight line or a diagonal line. She can't mysteriously change directions. That would be
Right.
called
Okay.
cheating.
Okay.
Um, then we have the king, right? The king is a relatively weak piece, and that's actually important for the game because if the king was too powerful, we could never end the game. The king has to be somewhat vulnerable so he can be checkmated. But the king, as Anatoly Karpov, the world champion, put it, the king is like a queen in miniature. The king can move one square in any direction.
Okay.
So if this king, I'm not going to switch to my board editor. But let's just imagine that the king was right here on this center square. You can
Uh-huh.
go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares. You can go to every one step in any direction, basically.
Okay.
And the king can never be captured. The way you win a chess game is not by capturing the king. That's actually allowed in speed chess, but we'll save that for later. In real chess and normal chess, um, the king must be checkmated, and that is the whole purpose of this game. Is we're doing everything that we can do in our power to prevent our king from being checkmated and to checkmate our opponent's king, and we will sacrifice everything to that end.
Mm. Okay.
um Couple little quick rules that I didn't mention is the pawn, if it gets to the other side of the board, pawns can get promoted, and pawns can become any piece that they want if they achieve the miraculous achievement of getting from one side of the board to the other, which is not a
Oh,
common
that's
thing. It
cool.
doesn't
Yeah, I
happen in
was like,
every
I've
game.
never heard of that before because, like, to me, that's checkers, but
It's
okay,
true.
cool. So if a pawn gets to the other side, you can basically swap it out for any piece that's been, like, removed from the board?
Not even. You can have a second queen on the chessboard.
Oh,
You can
that's
have a
sick. Okay,
third rook.
cool.
And then look at this special move. Let's do this really quickly. This is the other little special move in chess. This is the only time in chess where you can move two pieces in one move. And I'm going to clear out the space that we need to do this and
Alright,
developing
so
our
this is that,
pieces
like,
one
opening
after
that
the
very
other, just like
common
we discussed.
opening you were showing us.
Yes, this right here is called the Italian game.
Okay.
The Italian game. And when black goes, let's say they go here, which is a common continuation, bishop c5, the giuco piano, white can castle, and this is the special move that I'm showing you, castling. Castling is the only time in chess you can move two pieces in one move, and it's the only time in chess you can move two squares in one move with your king. You cannot castle through check or out of check. It's a luxury. And once you've moved your king, you cannot castle. Once you have moved the rook involved, you cannot, or the rook on that particular side of the board, you cannot castle. Because actually, if we cleared out space on this side of the board, we can castle on the queen side. And one of the dangerous things that can happen in a chess game is your king, sometimes your king and or your queen getting kind of stuck in the center of the board. You don't
Mm,
get your king out of harm's way quick enough. You might have made a bunch of really nice moves, but your king's in the line of fire and you pay the
right.
price,
And
right?
again, if they're to the sides of the boards, there's less kind of options, right? So that's why you don't want your good players to the sides of the boards because you want them to have a lot of options, but you wanna protect your
Oh
king,
my
so it may
goodness,
be better on the side,
Stephanie, you're
right?
so intuitive. You're doing great. A chess game is divided into three parts, just like a story. The chess game
Okay,
is divided into the opening game, the middle game, and the end game. Okay.
okay,
Right now, we're in the opening game. We're just developing our pieces. The goal of the opening game is threefold: develop your pieces, establish king safety, and the thing that you reminded me of a moment ago, which is controlling the center of the board. What I mean
mm,
by that, the four center squares: E4, E5, D5, and D4. These four center squares, through controlling the center, you control more space in general, and you allow for more mobility for your pieces. So your pieces are
okay,
more well placed, they're empowered.
awesome.
Okay. So one
Yeah,
of the key things is we don't want to just rush ahead and try to win the game too aggressively. We need to set things up first, right? Just like in most situations, you need to procure a position to operate from. You can't just burst right in and try to win right away. That's not proper technique, right? You can make an aggressive move if your opponent makes an unreasonable mistake. We'll capitalize on the mistake. But if your opponent is playing natural quality chess, don't be overly aggressive. That would be incorrect to do so. And there's a great saying by a great chess master who wrote a book called The Art of Sacrifice in Chess. His name is Rudolf Spielmann, and he has a great quote about the opening game, the middle game, and the end game. He says, "Play the opening game like a book, play the middle game like a magician, and the end game like a machine." Let's continue continue here. Now, you know, we've already started a game right here. So let's continue with our game. We went from describing our pieces to we're playing a chess game already. We're in the opening game. And right now, everybody, I hope you're as excited as I am. We're looking at a game by the first professional chess player in the history of the world.
Oh,
We're
okay.
looking at a game that was played in 1612. Giochino Greco was the first professional chess player in the history of the world. And it turns out he was quite a genius in his own right, we must say. For someone who had no computers, no professional chess league that was established at that time, he came up with quite a bit of theory that still stands to this day over 400 years later, which is pretty
Mm.
remarkable. Okay, our last move here was c3. I called this little pawn the guardian at the gate. He stops this knight from any funny business over here on either the b4 or e4 squares. And remember, like I said, we're fighting for control of the center, so this pawn is hitting the d4 square. Now black develops their other knight. They jump ahead in development. 1, 2, 3 pieces to 2. They're temporarily ahead in development, and white makes this little pawn move d3. All right. This is a fun little thing that we call gioco pianissimo, the quiet way of playing the quiet games. We're in the gioco piano. I don't know what happened to our notes on the side here. Maybe they'll load up. But this is the gioco pianissimo variation of the gioco piano. And now watch this. Remember we talked about castling? Here it's happening in our game. Black castles, and white does exactly what I said you shouldn't do. This is actually not really a good move, but sometimes not the best moves can be rewarded if the opponent doesn't respond properly. Instead of castling, what you do, or developing some of these queenside pieces which are undeveloped, the knight wants to be the troublemaking knight. I call this the mischief-making knight who ventures over to g5. Okay,
Okay.
so the knight is on g5 in the black king quadrant of the board, and black doesn't like that. Black uses the h pawn to kick the knight. h6,
Right. So
saying,
he has
"Get
to
out of
move
here, Mr.
now.
Knight.
Right.
Go
He has
away."
to move, otherwise he's gonna get caught the next play because that pawn goes diagonal attack.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You're a natural, Stephanie. So let me make this clear. If you don't have anything better to do, then just retreat. It's
Okay.
okay to retreat. Live to fight another day, like they say. The game here that Greco showed us 400 years ago is he doesn't retreat. He protects his knight and offers a sacrifice.
Okay.
And black happily accepts the sacrifice. They say, "Oh, free lunch. I love free lunch." H takes G and H takes G. And now, remember I said chess is based on the elements of material, time, and space? If we're going by
Yes.
just material, black is winning the game big time. They just took a knight. That's
Right.
game winning in a lot of situations, most situations. But they're not winning the game. They're losing the game severely in this particular case because what did white gain? They gained one
The
pawn, which is one unit
right.
of material. They gained one tempo, which is one unit of time, not in the form of a clock on the wall, but one move. Each move is like a beat in the
Okay.
measure of music, right? This knight wants to retreat. He doesn't want to give back the knight. He wants it to retain his material advantage. So he goes knight
Right.
h7. And what's the main thing that white gained? A lot of
Space.
space.
In the Yeah, they
This
control the
H
whole middle of
file
the
is like a
board.
floodgate.
Yeah.
Here they're controlling the H file. This,
Okay.
go back, this rook, before this sacrifice, this rook was just controlling this little pawn here. And he could
Right.
castle, and that's nice. But when black allowed the H file to be open, he opened a floodgate. And now, after he tries to save his knight and keep his material advantage, the game is pretty well over. after white makes this devastating move. Queen
Mm,
h5, threatening checkmate. This is what we call a queen rook battery. We're aiming at
okay.
h7. We're threatening to take the knight, and the king can't take the queen because the queen is protected by the rook. So
Mm,
what does black do? They only have one move. Now, one great thing about chess, I'm remembering another thing that my coach taught us, is that chess teaches us the difference between planning and dreaming. And you can dream all you want. There's not one single move on this chessboard to protect this knight. The knight could actually move out of the way to protect the h7 square, but that doesn't help because now we have queen h8 checkmate. We wouldn't go here and get captured by the knight. That would be a huge mistake. We make one further step, and again, queen protected by rook checkmate in the corner.
mm,
Okay, so that's just to show you that technically black, I'm deleting that, but technically black could defend h7, but it's useless. What else could they do? If you push this pawn to attack the queen, that doesn't do anything. The queen takes your knight just like she intended to do. This pawn, everybody, is called a pinned pawn. We can't move that pawn. Look, when I try to move it, it's going to keep bouncing. Why?
right.
Because the bishop is pinning the pawn. You can never expose your king to check. That's the most important rule. You cannot ignore
Okay.
check. So there's one move, everybody, that black can prolong the game.
Let's
Rook
see. Okay.
e8. Rook
Because now he's
e8,
protecting
making
again.
space to run.
Okay.
Well, no, now there's space to run. Now, if we go
Okay.
queen takes knight, well, the king can start running this way. And those are the three ways you can get out of check, everyone.
Okay.
CPR, capture, protect, or run. If you're in check and you can't do any of those things, it's checkmate and the game is over. But the game is about to be over anyhow, everyone, because we're going to use proper technique to win the game. Now, we could the bishop to take this pawn and fork the king and rook, and we'd get some material gain from that. But we're going for the gusto here. We have a winning combination to end the game, which is better than a material advantage. We're going queen f7 check. Now, if we took with the bishop, the king could have stepped over here or over here. But when we take with the queen, the king is getting bumped in the corner, and that's his only option. This is what we call win by force. And we continue with the concept of win by force when we go rook h7 check. We're
Okay.
sacrificing rook. Why is it a sacrifice? Because the rook is worth more than the knight. There's only one move for the black king, however. Can't go back into the line of fire. Absolutely not.
Right.
You have to take the unprotected rook. And we're gaining on the next move, Stephanie. This is called mate in one. Now, if we go check over here, that's not a good move. You can't take that queen with the king because the queen's protected by the bishop, but the rook will slide over and take the queen. That
Right.
doesn't work. We don't want to take this pawn. Well, our queen's not protected there. The queen is not invincible. She needs protection. You go queen takes g7, king takes queen. You blew it. You missed an opportunity to win.
Right.
If we go queen g6, again, king takes queen. If we go queen f5, it's check, and it's okay, but the king can step back and he lives to fight
Right.
another
And
day,
you're
at least
just
for the
like in
moment.
that
We could go
same
g6,
predicament.
and again, that's check. Exactly, and we kind of
Right.
got in our own way. We missed our opportunity to win, which
Right.
is we really that's the worst kind of
I
blunder that
think
you
I
can
know
make
where
in
we
life,
need to
is
go.
missing an opportunity to win. Really? You have an idea?
I think
What are you
it's
going to
in the
tell me? This is
H,
the
right?
last check. We saw this. That doesn't work.
Yeah. H8.
Oh my goodness, Stephanie, you're an auto genius.
Got it. Well, it helps that the dots are there and you did every single other dot besides that
Stephanie,
one. I'm like, well, it has to be.
hey, no, Stephanie, no. You're an auto genius. Queen h5. It's great to be alive. Well, if you're white, because we just won the game. Black will have to
Come
to
back for revenge.
get a rematch,
Yeah.
to feel the exuberance that white feels. Exactly, exactly. But notice, why is the game over? The king is in check and cannot get out of it.
Mm,
There's none of these pieces that can be interposed, which is a fancy way of saying block, between the queen and the king. The king can't step back. That's still the line of fire of the queen.
right,
You
because she
can't
can
step
go as
forward.
far
That's
as
the
she
line of fire
wants.
of the queen. You
Right.
can't step forward diagonally. Remember, right? Queens go diagonally, so this square is checked by the queen. And remember the proper technique we used in eliminating the f7
Right.
pawn? That prevents the king from stepping over to g7
Yeah.
because that bishop is coming in
Right.
handy and cutting off the only escape square.
Love how it really raises your awareness to like all these different things. Cause so many times in life, you just see the one option or the two options, or maybe you see three options. But in chess, it really makes you take account and like take stock of like, go here, and then they would do that. And then so you have to be thinking about multiple steps at a time, not just that one thing that's right in front of you.
Which is one of the best things that we learn from chess. Again, how is chess like life? We learn poise, which,
Mm,
remember, we said win with grace and lose with dignity. I had a lesson with one of my long-standing students earlier. He's a brilliant young man. It's just very serious and very mature about his chess. He's very easy to work with. We just have very productive lessons every time I talk to him, and he competes on a regular basis. And one thing that I'm so proud of him about, and I've told him this, is he shows so much poise. When he
mm,
loses a game and it's a tough game, sure, it hurts, but he learns from it. He says, darn it, I made this one mistake. And, while I didn't want to lose the game, it's really exciting to learn from my mistake, as opposed to getting too shaken up, feeling really bad about himself. He's a poised competitor, and that's something that is such a great attribute for young people to have. To learn how to lose properly. Of course, we want to win as much as we can, but we can't win all the time.
right. That's something I could have definitely used, I think, as a young person growing up. And like I said, a lot of these skills are really speaking to me now for things that I'm trying to like work on in my life and kind of tighten up or get some habits going. And so what I was going to ask you is, okay, so we've learned a lot here, right? We've learned all the pieces. We've had some of the basic moves. We went through one of the first um kind of chess games ever played, or one of the big chess moves
Yes, one
or
of the oldest
chess games
recorded games
created.
in history.
Right. And so now where do I go here as a beginner? Like, so that I don't feel overwhelmed, that I can practice. What should I be doing next?
There are all kinds of great chess resources out there. There are great chess books. There are
Mm,
great chess YouTube channels. And a saying of the world champion. Actually, there's a picture of me on my webpage shaking hands over the board with the current world champion of chess, possibly and probably the greatest player of all time at this point, Magnus Carlsen. And he has a great saying which influenced and inspired me as a teacher. He says, everything chess is good. So anything that you
okay,
can do
so
to activate your chess mind,
okay, I
go
love
for
that. Right. So play it, but also I think there's like this key component here is studying the moves, kind of memorizing some of the basic plays, right? Like when you go to basketball or football, you kind of have to know these basic setups. So I think that that probably is going to be a good place to start. And then of course playing it is a good thing. So whether that's playing online, I guess, versus a machine, if you have a
it.
friend, I like that Lee Chess because it seems like you can kind of play there and study. You should definitely reach out to him. He's a great
I'm
resource.
the founder of Remote Learning Chess. So please contact me for lessons.
So all of his information is going to be in the description down below, and give him a shout out, reach out, and
And you get a Teaching
let us
Liberty
know.
discount, no doubt.
Yes, let them know you heard about it on the Teaching Liberty podcast, and make sure you get that discount. Really appreciate you coming through.
I appreciate
Maybe
you so much,
sometime
Steph.
you can give me like the next level lesson up down the road, and we'll get into like more advanced beginner
Let's not
stuff.
wait too long.
Guys, make sure you hit that like button and leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you think of the chess lesson, and don't forget to reach out to Jeremiah to get your one-on-one virtual chess lesson. Until next time. Stay beautiful.